We're with Hugh Pope in Istanbul from the International Crisis Group. We're talking about their new report entitled Turkey Ending the PKK Insurgency. Mr. Pope, thank you for your time. Please give us a summary of the report. You have a list of recommendations for the Turkish government as well as Kurdish nationalists. Can you give us a rundown?
The main thing we're seeking to do by highlighting the positions of the various sides is to try and stop the current escalation of violence. We haven't seen so much killing for years, and there's more than 110 people killed since mid-June, and possibly as many as 200. And this is an escalation that is clearly prompted by the will of at least one side to go back to a more militarized situation. And we suspect that currently the PKK is pushing harder to make this happen. They're kidnapping, they're killing civilians, there are terrorist attacks. And therefore, we're saying to the government, don't fall into the trap. Remember that the reason that you've become popular among Turkey's Kurdish community is that you have pursued reforms, and we list these reforms and show how effective they've actually been, much more effective than many people realize. And we say at the same time to the Turkish Kurds, yeah, you have been oppressed, you have been denied, you have every right to pursue them. But it's very important that you, as a 15% of the country, everything you do should be clear, everything you should do should be able to be supported by everybody else in Turkey, because otherwise it won't happen. And they're currently boycotting the parliament, they have elected parliamentarians. You must go to the parliament and work on the reforms that are currently being discussed, and first of those is a new constitution for Turkey.
You do agree that in Turkey, realistically, politically, that reform is increasingly difficult so long as the attacks continue. You do address this in your report, do you not?
Yes, that's a very easy excuse. I think that we have a situation in Turkey where both sides and the leaderships understand each other. A tape was released last week which showed the main Kurdish insurgent group negotiating with top government representatives, and it was clear that they understood each other, and from lots of sources we know that they were very close to a deal. The problem was that their mutual understanding of what had to be done, basically an amnesty, a return to legal politics, and a proper ceasefire that will be really implemented, their understanding of that is not shared by the population at large, because both sides are indulging in very dangerous rhetoric against each other, and they have to pull back from this. The government understands what needs to be done, but they will never be able to do it as long as they haven't explained what it is that needs to be done. And I think we try and set out the way that this could be framed, and we think that universal rights, I mean, the Turkish Kurds really lack rights. I mean, there are currently 3,000 Turkish Kurd political activists in jail in Turkey for nothing except sympathizing or advocating PKK goals, and this is without any act of violence being involved. And this is clearly a situation which has to be addressed by the government. And of course, we're saying to the government, you're under attack. You must neutralize the threat, but you are the far stronger party. You must not lose control. You must keep the door open to negotiations, and above all, you have to explain to all sides why these rights need to be granted, to broaden the support that you have, because everyone knows that, and the government above all knows that, possibly a cost of $300 billion over the 27 years of this insurgency. And above all, again, Turkey is acting very big in the region. It's presenting itself as a model. But this is really its Achilles heel. It has to sort this out if it's going to be taken seriously as a regional power.
There are calls for reform on behalf of the Turkish government. You mentioned the constitutional reform process as a must. What does your report call to Kurdish nationalists and the PKK on the side?
We call for the PKK to end the current escalation. We call for the legal party of the Turkish Kurd national movement to re-enter parliament. And we call them to be clear in their goals. It's almost tragic. For instance, the legal Kurdish political parties Congress in September set out a very reasonable set of negotiating positions about what their goals were, but they spoiled it in public opinion's eye by making all the stress on something they call democratic autonomy. And we have a section of the report which is called The Unbearable Vagueness of Democratic Autonomy, because it's never defined. And that allows all the fears and suspicions and prejudices to fill the gap left by that lack of definition. And so when they say that, most of the people in Turkey, and remember, more than 80% of people in Turkey are not Kurdish, they think, aha, democratic autonomy. That means the Kurds are going for an independent state, which is not actually the case. And therefore, we're saying to the Kurdish nationalists, be clear about what you want, just as we're saying to the government, be clear about what it is you're going to give and tell everybody why it's important.
There has been a series of reforms in the recent years on this issue, of course. What more is the question? What should be done next as an effective first step, do you think?
The reform process was called the democratic opening by some, and we think that's the best name for it. And it was about giving basic rights for people who have always lived in this geography and speak a language called Kurdish, and that therefore that used to be completely banned in Turkey, and in the last 10 years it has become socially, legally, and culturally acceptable to use Kurdish, but it still cannot be used in business. It cannot be used in schools. It cannot be used in municipal offices, even at the smallest level. And this is very counterproductive. And that's something that will need a lot of legal fixing. So in the constitution, it has to be fixed, and in the legal system, it has to be. So mother language education, and they also have to fix the whole legal system, which is putting far too many Turkish Kurd activists behind bars without having committed any violence whatsoever. Those are the two main things that have to be done straight away.
Final question, Mr. Pope. How was your report received in Turkey on all sides, for that matter?
I think that it was received with some disappointment by the Turkish Kurdish side. They feel that that there should be much more definition of Kurdishness as a separate thing, whereas our report clearly reflects what we were told by most Turkish Kurds, that they feel as if they are Turkish Kurds. On the government side, I have to say a very reasonable response, which is almost unimaginable even 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, government representatives accepted to be briefed on it and engaged with us on the substance of the issues, and we have been able to make public presentations of this in Ankara, and these have been perfectly civilized discussions. And so and that is actually what people underestimate with the democratic opening when it started in 2009. It's true. It's very minimal. It's very unplanned. It's very unspecific, and it should be more so. But the atmosphere changed and has allowed people like us to come in and try and create a new narrative, try and create new language, try and show what both sides have done to each other in a neutral, calm voice, and be listened to. And I think that's a big change, and gives me a lot of hope for the future once this current escalation has been brought under control.
Hugh Pope from the International Crisis Group, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.